You're holding a piece of carbon, just carbon. The same element that makes up charcoal, pencil graphite, and the soft black tip of a number 2 pencil. But in this particular arrangement, crystallized deep underground over millions of years under temperatures that would vaporize steel. That piece of carbon costs more than your car, possibly more than your house, and you have almost certainly seen someone cry over one. How did that happen? And why do you never really question it? The story of how humans made rocks worth billions is not a story about rocks. It is a story about you, about the silent, invisible architecture of value that exists inside every human mind, constructed long before you were born, and upgraded invisibly with every generation. Start with a basic fact that your brain will resist. Value is not a property of objects. Value is a property of minds. No rock is worth anything on its own. The diamond sitting in a jeweler's case is chemically indistinguishable from the graphite in a pencil. Same element, same atoms, different arrangement. The difference in price between them is not a measurement of their properties, it is a measurement of human agreement. The philosopher and economist Thorstein Veblen noticed something important about this in 1899. In his foundational work, The Theory of the Leisure Class, he described what he called conspicuous consumption. He had observed that in wealthy societies, the most desirable objects were often the least useful. People paid more for things that were harder to acquire, not because difficulty made them better, but because difficulty made the acquisition visible to other people. The price tag itself became a signal, not just to others, but to yourself. Your brain interprets a high price as a measure of something real, even when it knows rationally that it should not. That impulse is ancient, far older than economics, far older than money. Go back 75,000 years. Your ancestor is walking along what is now the coast of South Africa. They are bending down to pick up a small shell. It is perforated, deliberately, and threaded onto a strand of fiber. They are wearing it, not for warmth, not for protection, for a reason that has no survival value in the immediate sense, but that turns out to be one of the most important things a human brain ever learned to do. Researcher Francesco Dorico at the University of Bordeaux has studied shell ornaments from sites across Africa and the Middle East and found consistent evidence of deliberate personal ornamentation going back at least 100,000 years. What this tells you is not that your ancestors were vain. It tells you that symbolic thinking, the capacity to decide that an object represents something beyond itself, is one of the oldest cognitive tools in your evolutionary toolkit. It may be what separated modern humans from every other species that came before. Rocks were the first currency of meaning. Consider lapis lazuli. It is a deep blue stone flecked with gold-colored pyrite. It is not the rarest mineral on Earth, but in the ancient world it came from one place, the mountains of what is now northeastern Afghanistan. That distance in the ancient world was almost incomprehensible. The stone traveled through trade networks across thousands of miles to reach Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. Pharaohs wore it. Priests used it in ritual. It was ground into pigment and painted on the eyelids of the dead to protect them on their journey into the afterlife. Tutankhamun's burial mask is inlaid with it. The stone was not valuable because of its chemistry. It was valuable because of everything humans had decided to layer onto it: divinity, protection, the color of the sky where the gods were said to live. Gold follows the same logic but carries it further. If you evaluate gold purely on its practical merits, it is a mediocre metal. It is too soft to make tools, too heavy for most structural uses. It has excellent electrical conductivity, which is why it is used in modern electronics, but your ancestors did not know that. They valued gold for a different reason entirely. Gold does not rust. It does not tarnish. It does not decay. In a world where everything, food, wood, cloth, flesh, surrendered to time, gold refused. It looked the same on the day you found it, as it did 1,000 years later. To a human mind that watches everything it loves disappear, something that resists disappearance feels like a miracle. Your ancestors did not value gold because they failed to think critically. They valued it because they were paying deep attention to something true about the nature of time. But at a certain point, the story of precious rocks stops being about geology or evolution and starts being about advertising. And this is where the machinery underneath your perception becomes visible in a way that is almost uncomfortable to look at directly. In 1938, the De Beers Diamond Company was sitting on a crisis. They had discovered enormous new deposits of diamonds in southern Africa. The supply was expanding rapidly. And in basic economics, when supply expands without a corresponding expansion in demand, price collapses. De Beers needed to make people want more diamonds. Not just the wealthy, everyone. They needed to turn a luxury ornament into a universal ritual. They hired an advertising agency called N.W. Ayer and gave them an almost impossible brief. Make diamonds feel necessary. Make people feel that without a diamond, something important is missing from their lives. A young copywriter named Frances Garrity worked on this account for years. She was single. She never married. And in 1947, she wrote the 4 words that would reshape the material culture of the Western world for generations. A diamond is forever. Not because diamonds are literally forever, they are not. Heat them to a high enough temperature and they will combust. They are carbon. But Garrity understood that she was not writing about chemistry. She was writing about love. She was writing about the one thing every human being wants and fears losing. She fused the indestructibility of the stone to the desire for permanent love, and the seam between those two things became invisible. Within 15 years, presenting a diamond ring as an engagement gift transformed from a luxury custom of the wealthy into an expected social ritual across the United States, and then across the Western world. Most people who participate in it today have no idea it was created deliberately by a specific company in a specific decade for a specific commercial purpose. Dan Ariely, a behavioral economist at Duke University, describes the cognitive mechanism underneath this in his research on what he calls arbitrary coherence. Here's how it works. When you first encounter a price or a value for something, that number becomes an anchor in your memory. From that point forward, your brain uses it as a reference point for all future judgments. Even if the anchor was completely arbitrary, and even if you know it was invented, it continues to shape what you are willing to pay and what you believe something is worth. The first time you learned that engagement rings cost what they cost, that number was deposited into your brain as a baseline. You did not set that anchor. Someone else set it for you decades before you were born, and your brain accepted it as a fact of the world. This is why the mechanism has worked in so many different cultures and across so many different stones. Jade in China, where philosophers wrote about it as the embodiment of virtue, hard, smooth, incorruptible. Turquoise among the ancestral Pueblo peoples of the American Southwest, worn and traded across networks that stretched for hundreds of miles. Pearls in medieval Europe, which the Catholic Church at various points attempted to ban from ordinary people because their exclusivity was a signal that ordinary people were not supposed to send. Rubies in Burma, where a perfect red stone was believed to grant invincibility in battle. Each culture picked a rock, poured meaning into it, and then the rock and the meaning became indistinguishable from each other. You could not perceive one without perceiving the other. But here's the part of the story that most people never hear. Most of the diamonds on Earth are not rare. Geologists estimate that diamond deposits are far more widespread in the Earth's crust than the market price would ever suggest. De Beers knew this. For most of the 20th century, the company maintained its dominance by purchasing diamonds from mines worldwide and controlling how many entered the market at any given time. They created artificial scarcity. They kept prices high not because nature had made the supply limited, but because a corporation made an agreement with itself to make it limited. The geological reality and the economic reality were two entirely different things, and you were shown only one of them. The rock did not change. The agreement changed everything. What does this tell you about how your brain actually functions? Researcher Paul Bloom at Yale has spent years studying how belief shapes the experience of physical objects. In experiments, participants were shown 2 objects that were physically identical and told that one had a special history, that it had been touched by a famous person, or that it had unusual origins. Consistently, participants rated the story-imbued object as more beautiful, more pleasant to touch, and more worth keeping. The object had not changed in any way that instruments could measure, but the perception of it had changed completely. Your brain is not evaluating objects. It is evaluating meaning, and meaning is constructed by other people, inherited across generations, and absorbed before you ever have the chance to examine it. Think about what you pay for without a second thought. A stone with a certificate of authenticity, a particular metal in a particular color, a gem from a specific mine in a specific region of the world. It does not feel like participation in a shared hallucination. It feels like recognition of something real. That feeling is precisely what was designed. That feeling is the product. This is not an argument against valuing things. A wedding ring that means forever is more than carbon. It is a container for a promise. A piece of lapis lazuli worn to honor the dead is more than a mineral. It is a technology for holding grief. Shared meaning is how humans build anything larger than themselves. The capacity to agree that something represents something else is the cognitive move that makes civilization possible. Without it, there is no language, no money, no religion, no art. The point is not that you are wrong to find value in rocks. The point is that you are the author of that value, even when you feel like you are merely recognizing it. The value does not live in the stone. It lives in the agreement between minds. And agreements can be made. Agreements can be changed. Most importantly, agreements can be examined by a mind willing to look at them directly. So the next time you see a diamond in a glass case, lit carefully under white light to scatter brilliance across the room, understand what you are actually looking at. You are not looking at a rock. You are looking at 100,000 years of human symbolic cognition, compressed into crystalline form. You are looking at ancient Egyptians grinding lapis lazuli to paint the eyelids of their dead. You are looking at Frances Garrity at her desk in 1947, searching for the sentence that would change what love was expected to look like. You are looking at a species that needs the world to mean something, and that found a way to make even stone carry that need. You are holding a piece of carbon, and every gram of its value, every penny, every dollar, every number on that certificate, came from inside a human mind, just like it always has.